And so they wrote their letter of concern to Thomas Jefferson. I meant to bring that letter today. I'll bring it next week. It's in a little orange file. Actually, it's not little. This file has grown since I started this series. Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter back. He understood the Danbury Baptist with a sympathetic heart. As America's newest president, Jefferson wrote a letter back to the Danbury Baptist on January 1st, 1802, right after he had become president. The president thanked the ministers for their letter, and then he went on to express that it was his intentions as their national leader to keep sacred the original intention of the founding fathers, which, oh, by the way, he happened to be one. He said that the framers, these are the words, the framers had built a wall of separation between government and religion that the government can never tear down. In other words, it was Thomas Jefferson who was saying in this very letter, this isn't a document, this isn't something signed by those who signed the Ten Amendments. This is a letter. Thomas Jefferson, in essence, was saying, I understand your concern, but you don't need to be worried about your concern. The framers intended to keep the government out of the church. And what the First Amendment is a wall of separation. The church cannot dictate to the government, and the government cannot dictate to the church. And that's what the President of the United States wrote back to these Danbury Baptists. Both of those letters I meant to lay right here, and I just walked out without my orange file. It'll be here next week. But I want you to read those letters. Today, we have been told that a proper understanding of the separation of church and state is to keep the church out of the affairs of the state. It is used to inhibit religious expression. It has been interpreted that way for the last 50-some years. And next week we'll address how the First Amendment got literally turned upside down. But the truth for us today is that President Thomas Jefferson understood the concerns of the Baptist ministers, and he likewise understood the original intent of the founding fathers. After all, Jefferson was a founding father. In the years to come, there would be those who would try to get the government to inhibit the church. So on March 27th, 1854, okay, just think historically what time that is. That's right before the Civil War. Congress decided once again to search out the original intention of the founders. In the House Judiciary Committee report, the Congress stated, this is what's in the congressional record. Had the people, the fathers, during the Revolution, a suspicion of any attempt to war against Christianity, that revolution would have been strangled in its cradle at the time of the adoption of the Constitution and its amendments. The universal sentiment was that Christianity should be encouraged, but not any one sect, denomination. The report continued. In this age, there is no substitute for Christianity. That was the religion of the founders of the Republic, and they expected it to remain the religion of their descendants. 2 months later, the same House Judiciary Committee made this proclamation. The great, vital, and conservative element in our system, the very thing that holds our system of government together, is the belief of our people in pure doctrines and the divine truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Would any of us be left standing if the House Judiciary Committee today made that proclamation? I would fall on my knees with surprise and humility. But in 1854, the House Judiciary Committee went on record and made that statement. A minister of the gospel can't say it any better than the House Judiciary Committee. If I tried to improve that paragraph that I just read for you and put it in Barry's spin, I wouldn't be able to improve it. It is clear what the intent of the First Amendment was and remained so in this nation for many, many years. Those words come from 1854 Congress. Those elected leaders refused to separate Christian faith from the affairs of government or from the public arena. However, it was not just Congress that refused to do such a thing. It was the United States Supreme Court that refused to separate the Christian faith from the affairs of government or from the public arena. In October of 1878, several years after the last that I just read for you, in Reynolds versus United States, it was heard by the Supreme Court. In this case, the plaintiffs tried to use Thomas Jefferson's phrase of a wall separating church and state to their own liking, hoping to inhibit the free expression of religious activities in public forums. The court didn't allow the plaintiffs to misuse Jefferson's intentions. The court clearly said that Jefferson's letter was meant to protect rather than to remove Christian values and principles from the public forum. All of these pieces of information that I am handing to you are out there on the historical record for anyone to see. But these facts have been omitted from modern history. We've talked about that in this series. It's as if they never existed. Quite frankly, if all we had in our hands to read were simply the words of the First Amendment itself, we'd have all we need. No state church, no inhibition of religious expression by the government. That's all we need. But we have so much more to hold in our hands. The biblical story about King Uzziah is a good example of why the government needs to stay out of the affairs of the religious institution. The king was good for Israel. He was so powerful that his military might had eventually brought peace to the people. But he thought that the king could usurp the responsibilities of the priest down at the temple. He didn't need those priests to make an offering of sacrifice for him. After all, he was the king. He could do such a thing himself, or so King Uzziah thought.